This is a story of my grandpa, Cleve Foley. He was born Charlie Cleveland Foley on the 9th of April, 1898, to William Howard Foley and Mary L. Rohr. His brother Willie Lee was born 2 years before. His mother died giving birth to twins when Cleve was almost 4 years old. So Howard and a 28-year-old widower turned his two small children over to his sister-in-law, Minnie Rohr, to raise, or at least until he found a new wife to take care of his boys. Howard remarried in 1905 to Martha Bolden. It's unclear when the boys came back into the household. Cleve had 6 stepsisters and stepbrothers. His grandpa Buck Foley and grandma Jenny both died in October 1914, 11 days apart. Cleve was 16 years old. Cleve was raised in a section of Patrick County we call the Pilton Schoolhouse. As a young boy, I used to ride horses over in that area with my daddy and a bunch of our horse friends. Daddy referred to it as the old home place. Once in 1981, Grandpa showed me the old family home, which was nothing but a chimney or two still standing, covered by weeds so thick you couldn't get within 100 feet. And out past the old house was a gravesite of his father, who died in 1937. Grandpa Cleve married Loney Bet Pilson on the 18th of March 1920, when he was 22 and she was 16. She was the daughter of John Rufus Pilson and Mary Molly Law. They had 8 children: Thelma in 1921, Ray in 1922, Mildred in 1924, twins Pauline and my daddy Eugene in 1926, Hazel in 1929, Robert in 1931, and Paul in 1936. In 1941, they adopted Marshall, who was the son of 15-year-old Pauline. Grandpa Cleve told me a story about going to West Virginia coal mines in the Great Depression days. He said he was making 35 cents an hour at Stanleytown Furniture, and he went to West Virginia for better money. The family remained in Stanleytown. He told me they had him lay flat on his back on a sled and would tow that sled a mile or so underground to get him to the work area in the coal mine. After a couple of months, he was back at Stanleytown, where they hired him at his old job for 25 cents an hour. The family seemed to move back and forth in various rental houses in Patrick and Henry County. He lived in Stanleytown much of his adult life while they were raising kids. And they moved permanently to Elamsville, and he bought his first house from Roy Foley in 1958. He lived there till around 1974 and moved back to Stanleytown with his second wife, May, in an old factory house across the street from his daughter, Pauline. My daddy built our house in 1958 right next door to Grandpa Cleve. In the 60s, it seemed like every Sunday, over half of his children would come to visit. That made for a lot of activity on Sunday afternoons. Grandma Loney had a problem with her weight for many years and had been in clinics to help her lose weight. She eventually died from complications of diabetes on the 10th of February 1963. The children contributed money to help pay funeral expenses because all of Grandpa's money had gone to pay doctor bills. Not long after Loney's death, Grandpa Cleve retired from the furniture factory. He led a solemn Christian life alone, but stayed busy in the summer with a big garden and keeping everything clean as a pin on his property. He seemed to thrive on physical labor. He attended the Elamsville Old Brethren Church regularly, but also went to revivals at other churches. I remember during a revival at the Buffalo Ridge Church of God of Prophecy, he stood up and requested the congregation sing Rock of Ages. To my knowledge, Grandpa Cleve never owned a TV. In the mid-60s, he might come over to our house and watch the 6 o'clock news several times a year, probably in the winter. He got reacquainted with a widow he had known in his younger days, and on the 24th of February 1966, he married Sally Mae Plaster Greenwood. I went into the Navy in November '72 and didn't see Grandpa much until the late '70s, after he moved to Stanleytown. My routine on a weekend visit from Virginia Beach, where I was in the Navy, would be on our way back on Sundays we would stop by and visit Grandpa Cleve and May. He was always delighted to have company. Around 1981, I began researching the Foley family tree. Having the benefit of living grandparents on both sides, I had a great starting point. Grandpa Cleve literally recited from memory 2 generations of Foleys. His stopping point was he did not know the identity of his great-grandparents, who had died long before he was born. So finding his great-grandparents became my immediate focus. In 1982, I went to Stewart Courthouse and got a copy of a marriage license for his Uncle Reed Foley, who had married on the 4th of July, 1865, and that marriage certificate identified Reed's parents as Jeremiah and Nancy Foley. Jeremiah was born in 1794 and died 20 years before Grandpa Cleve was born. Grandpa was my guest of honor when I enlisted in the Navy in 1981 in front of the Jeb Stuart statue at the courthouse in Stuart. In 1988, I was transferred to Naples, Italy. We stopped by to say goodbye to Grandpa Cleve in May, and I'd come to grips with the fact it would most likely be the last time I would see him. It was a sad goodbye, especially for my daughter Michelle, who was very fond of her great-grandpa. But as luck would have it, I was back in Norfolk, Virginia for training in May of '89, and I tacked on a week's vacation to go to Patrick County to see my family. I made a big surprise visit to Grandpa Cleve in May, but without knowing the lingering feeling that this again would be the last time I would see him. Grandpa Cleve still drove a car, but normally not very far and not after dark. According to my cousin Earl Hazelwood, Grandpa Cleve had driven from Stanleytown to Stuart to check up on his son Marshall. It had gotten late, so on his way home it was already dark, and he stopped his car on Route 8, just past the coal storage. It was presumed he must have thought he had pulled off the road. But a short time later, a car traveling 55 miles an hour hit his parked car in the right lane. He was transported to Winston-Salem Hospital, where he died on 20th of October, 1989. He was buried in the Ross Harbor Cemetery in Eansville beside his first wife, Lonnie. Grandpa Cleve and Lonnie raised 9 kids. They had 38 grandchildren, 63 great-grandchildren, and to date, 84 great-great-grandchildren and 11 great-great-great-grandkids. Grandpa Cleve led a good Christian life. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't curse, but it was not without hardships. So, that's our story of Grandpa Cleve.